camera.
I'm calling to order the Woburn School Committee meeting for October 13th, 2021. Could we all salute the flag, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Chair, members of the community, members in the audience, please remain standing for a moment of silence for Margie Deva, one of our longtime educators here in the system. May she rest in peace, Margie Deva. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mulrennan. Good afternoon, evening, everybody. This meeting will be recorded and broadcast on Woburn Public Media. Anybody that will speak in front of the school committee consents to being recorded. Could the superintendent please call the roll?
Ms. Chisholm.
Yes.
Ms. Cormier.
Present.
Mr. Lipset.
Present.
Mr. Kissel.
Here.
Mr. Mulrennan.
Present.
Dr. Wells.
Here.
Ms. Crowley.
Present. Okay. Moving on to approval of minutes of 9/29/21. Do I have any action?
Motion to approve. Second.
I have a motion to approve in a second. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, the motion has it. Public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to come before the school committee? Of course. Good evening. Just
Hi.
identify yourself and perhaps the school that you're affiliated with.
I'm Rachel Kubery, and my child goes to the Harold Wyman. So I'm here to speak today about COVID-19 safety updates, which is on the agenda later, but public comment is first. So my daughter attends the Harold Wyman, like I just said. Since Friday afternoon, we've had 4 positive COVID cases at our school. My daughter was identified as a close contact. I received the call from the school nurse on Friday after school. I was told that she was in the 6-foot range and therefore exempt from quarantine and the test and stay program. The nurse walked me through considerations for getting my daughter tested outside of school. When I asked about testing in school, I was told that that was not an option. The nurse told us to consider limiting her activities outside of school, but did not tell us to quarantine her. My daughter continues to attend school, though she wears her mask while she takes it off and eats both snack and lunch indoors. DESC created free pooled testing for all school districts this year. DESC strongly recommended that all schools participate in the testing. As you know, Woburn does not participate. I'm asking the district publicly consider what it would take to utilize this program. I'm asking that we consider creative strategies such as using parent volunteers or providing pooled testing only for classrooms with a positive case. I ask that we consider the inequity that our current system places on our students and families when we ask parents of children in the 3 to 6 foot range of a positive COVID student, which is the CDC definition of a close contact, to consider testing on their own. I work in the public schools in a neighboring town. We participate in pooled testing. At our school committee meeting last night, it was publicly disclosed that they found 1 positive case in the pooled testing in recent weeks. They then investigated that case and found 8 more cases within that classroom for a 35% positivity rating in that 1 classroom. The classroom's remote. When I talked to the school nurse on Friday, I was grocery shopping. I did the best I could to retain the information. I went home and I went to the school website to reread the information that Woburn put out about its COVID measures. I couldn't find anything. I clicked around. I eventually found the 2020 COVID guide, much of which is outdated. As a result, even my report to you this evening might not be accurate, as it's based on my memory from the grocery store and the form letter that all Harold Wyman parents received. So I'm also asking that updated COVID information be added to the district website for the whole community to access. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else in the audience that would like to come before the school committee? Not seeing any, okay. I'll just say publicly that we do have COVID-19 measures on the agenda tonight, and I'm sure that Dr. probably be addressing some of the concerns as stated in the public comment. I cannot get on the internet, Ms. McLeod, and I was wondering if I could use your computer to hear from our
I
student
can get on
representative to the school
Oh.
committee?
Yeah.
Courtney's on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I could be my computer. Are we looking for the Zoom link?
Yes.
Oh, you want me to just go to the screen?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, that's fine.
If you want to give me the machine, the sound, I can also take it.
Oh, yeah.
We'll do all.
I really appreciate that, Ms. Young. I appreciate it, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
We give the opportunity of our student representative to give us information via remote in order to save her from coming to the Joyce at night, so this is very,
Thank you.
Courtney's good at getting us hooked up.
I am mastering the hybrid meeting. All right.
Yeah, that's Courtney.
Yes, it's a big picture of me.
so again, by way of introduction, this is Faith Frandudo, who is was elected the student representative to the school
Yes.
committee, a very important position.
Hi Faith, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, welcome.
Can you hear me?
Everybody good?
Yep.
Great. Yes, we can.
All right, I'll get started. So in terms of what's happening at the high school, Term 1 progress reports were sent out to students and parents on Tuesday, October 12th through the student portals. This week and last, students are running for class elections, and those not running or registered to vote will be able to vote in all primaries, and the general election will take place this Friday. The Activities Fair will also take place this Friday, October 15th, with over 40 clubs and activities represented. All students are invited to walk through the Activities Fair and sign up for new clubs and activities. Freshman mentors in their initial trainings have been pushed into many of the freshman advisory periods. The mentors are one of a group of young leaders. Peer mediators were also trained, and the mediator advisors presented to the staff in the last faculty meeting as a means of promoting the peer mediation program at the high school. This long-standing and highly effective program at Wmhs provides students with hands-on training in real-life mediation situations. Alice and emergency drills took place on October 1st without any issues. The advisory prior to the drills was used as a way to review each emergency situation so that students and staff were better prepared on the day of the drills. WPD supported the execution of each scenario, and thank you WPD. The WMHS marching band had an outstanding performance at the competition in Wakefield this past weekend, placing second in their division. The WMHS math team hosted an in-person competition last week for the first time in over a year. And likewise with the WMHS science team, which has upcoming competitions. All fall athletic teams have been doing well, and a large number of students are participating. Winter athletic signups will begin within the next couple of weeks. The Thanksgiving football game has been confirmed to take place on Wednesday, November 24th at the high school at 7:30 p.m. or rather at Fenway Park. More to come on ticketing. And the players are very excited about this unique opportunity. In terms of upcoming events, the PSAT will be held on October 16th at the high school for current 10th grade and 11th grade students. The ACT will be held October 19th through October 23rd, also at the high school. The National Honor Society induction will be held on October 28th from 6:30 to 8:30. And the SAT will also be held at WMHS on November 6th. And that concludes my notes for the high school.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if, can you hear me, Ms. Frandudo? Okay.
I can, yes.
Oh, okay, great. Does any member of the school committee have any questions for Ms. Frandudo?
I just have a clarification. On the Honor Society, I had 7 o'clock. It starts at 6:30?
The Honor Society time start?
Yeah.
Yes, it's going to be 6:30 to 8:30 on October 28th.
Oh, all right, 'cause I think the invitation.
Invitation said 7, so.
Oh, okay.
So, all right, so it's
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, okay, so So we won't be late.
All right, thank you, Ms. Franduda. We just had
Awesome,
a
thank you.
confusion. Anyone else have any questions for?
Is she running for election?
Oh, are you running for election? Okay.
Oh, is she frozen?
Oh.
Oh, there.
We were asking if you were running for election.
I actually am not able to run for any election positions because I have this position, so if not, I probably would have ran for something, but the elections for my students have been pretty interesting and good.
Just
That's
let her
a
know,
good
school
question.
committee's the best.
Yeah, this is the best. So.
Everyone already thinks you have the best one.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming, and again, you can stay and deliberate on any topic on the agenda, but you also do your homework, so thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you. All right,
Thanks, Faith.
Thank you. Good?
yes. Thank you so much, Ms. Young. Apologize.
I'm just going to disconnect all of you.
All right, so I just want to alert the committee that food service director is not going to make it tonight for things out of her control, so she'll be on the next agenda, short thereafter. So we only have 2 agenda items. We have Dr. Crowley will present Mcas data review, and then we'll go into the COVID safety updates. So, Dr. Crowley?
So I'm going to introduce, it says Dr. Crowley and MCAS data review, and my role is going to be brief. I'm going to introduce Courtney Young, who's going to do the MCAS and data review. And while she's pulling up her presentation, I would just, this is different this year. Obviously, we're coming out of, we're still in a pandemic, and the MCAS data that we're going to present to you tonight is reflective of a test taking during a pandemic. And when it was decided at the state level to give, it was very explicit to be an internal diagnostic tool. And that's the way we're approaching tonight's presentation. And hopefully you'll hear from us that that's the way we approached it, but that we have a plan to move forward. So with that said, Ms. Young.
Sorry, I'm just disconnecting the cords. Alrighty. So thank you, Dr. Crowley, and I think it's important, although I am presenting, that this is really the work and contribution from an entire leadership team. So a lot of the things that we're seeing today were gathered not only from myself, but the entire administrative team, coordinators, coaches. So as Dr. Crowley said, that the intentions of MCAS for this year was diagnostic, and it was to provide us with insight into potential losses of learning, so that we can be prioritizing and moving kind of in the right direction in that way. And so as we're looking at it as diagnostic data, we as a district, prior to COVID, had really built a commitment to kind of building a compositional library of diagnostic data. And so as we're looking not only at the MCAS data, what we're really looking at is how does that go in line with the data that we are giving as a district, and how is that determining the decisions that we're making as we move forward this year. So I also think that, as we will see, and as it came out in the kind of the MCAS press release, was that across the state there was a decline in scores, and the decline was seen more significant in math, and I would say that that's consistent with what you'll see with us. But I also think that you'll see places where we did not have a decline and we had things that stayed and maintained. And so I think while there are students who may have had a loss of learning, I also think that, to a great credit, there's a lot of students that learned and a lot of teaching that happened and a lot of growth that still existed. So kind of looking at what our kind of vision for looking at the MCAS data as well as data as a whole is that we're meeting the needs of our individual students and making sure that no students get lost along the way, and that we're really prioritizing our instructional time. I don't think that it's to anybody's surprise that has us leaving school in March of 2020 that there are gaps in learning for students. I think with that, we cannot go back for students in 6th grade and start where they left off in the end of 4th grade, that we have to be looking at where are the priority of the standards, what do they need, we can't go back and teach all of the pieces, we're looking at what are the parts that we need to kind of accelerate students forward. We've done a lot of work around it, looking at data to match student programming, as well as examine the data of the students that are in front of the educators at the time. So not looking back as much as looking forward, And so as we're looking at the data this evening, you'll see it combined as how it is for the class profile. So what is our current elementary school teachers looking at for Mcas data of the students in front of them, and how that matches the diagnostic data of the students that are sitting in front of them. So before I go into the data, I wanted to just talk about kind of some of the work that we've been doing, and ignore the numbers of the craziness. I'll explain what it is. But really, the work that we've done to make sure that we are giving data in real time. We've spoken to the committee before about our Woburn Analytics, the dashboard and platform where we're collecting all of our assessments. This allows us to take all of the assessments that we give, be it DIBELS, IXL, Mcas data, and aggregate the data so that we're looking at the grades, the schools, demographics, and as you can see, kind of the columns down the side, we're able to look at students by gender, by race, by income status, and look at how are we doing on every assessment from that aggregate. And so all of the data that we pulled this evening, we pulled straight from this dashboard as well as previous dashboards. And so if I were going to pull up the dashboard live, which I can't because of students' data and their privacy, what you would see is that the entire tool is interactive. So if I were to click on the DIBELS oral reading fluency on the yellow bar, I would get an entire list of students by their school, their grade, their classroom teacher, so that we can be kind of prioritizing and grouping really, really quickly. What we have rolled out this year is that we now, as teachers are entering data, they're also getting a class analytics. So they're getting a classroom of all of the data that they are collecting on their students. With that, this will move forward with students. So as a fourth grade teacher for next school year, we'll get the students coming in and they'll get all of their data from the previous year. I say that because we're looking kind of at everything diagnostically. We're recognizing that we're not going to close a gap from now until June. It's a multi-year process. And so we're really building the capacity for us to be looking at this over time. And so when looking at the data, currently, if we're looking at what we're looking at the elementary level, is we have our current 4th and 5th graders, which would have been last year's 3 and 4, looking at their 2019 ELA in math versus their 2021 ELA in math. And similar to that of across the state is that there was a decline in both, but a more significant one in math. However, I would say it as a whole, I am across the board, think that considering what we just did for a year and a half, I think we are pretty close. I think we've talked a lot about math as a group, as a sequential subject, meaning that if you, at the end of March of 2020 in 4th grade, had not gotten to place value in decimals, when you were in either hybrid learning or fully remote and you started to learn about dividing decimals, it was probably really hard. And given kind of the nature of what the year looked like and kind of the progression of how skills build in math, it is to no surprise that I think that we're going to see kind of at the initial outtake of our data that the math gap is a little bit bigger. So with that, we'll kind of talk about what we're doing kind of internally to be getting that information quickly and targeting students' needs. But I think that as a whole, what we're seeing is pretty consistent with what's around us as well as what I would anticipate given learning.
So could you just walk us through that graph, please?
Sure. Oh, I was going to say, because it drove me nuts. So the old data was done in circles, and the new data is now done in bars.
Okay.
And I really wanted them to both be the same, and I tried really hard, but I couldn't make it. So the data, so that's blue on both is students who exceeded expectations, green on both is students who met, yellow on both is partially meeting, and red on both is not meeting expectations. So as we look at it now, our ELA in 2019, we had 5% of our students did not meet, and then 6% in 2021, 34% of ELA in 2019 versus 40 in 2021. But again, our exceeding expectations stayed the same. And so when looking at the shift, it was really primarily a movement, and this is pretty consistent. that are not meeting and are exceeding generally stays around the same, and that the movement is primarily in our meeting and our partially meeting, which again would kind of speak to the fact that it's, just some gaps that students didn't get that we need to just kind of go back in and directly teach, but kind of the shift and the adjustment that kind of how far they're off is a pretty small margin.
And when you look at the actual student level, that's reflective, like students that they were the ones that moved. It wasn't like students going from exceeds and so forth.
Yes, when you go through, and I clicked through kind of like a sampling of students across the board, there was no like yellows, there was no red to blues,
Yeah.
and very infrequently would you see a red to a green. It's primarily the adjustment between the green and yellow. I will say that in math, the shift, there was more shifting down to the red, and as we looked at our district data, I would say that's also consistent. But I think we're looking at a lot of it as just certain skills that students need to go back and have reinforced before they're ready to move forward. Is that good?
Yes, thank you.
Yep. So we created prior to kind of pandemic times, and I think that a lot of the success that we've had in our return to school is a lot of the structures and the investments that we made beforehand. We invested in our content specialists. We have Title I teachers. We have interventionists, and we had created a win block prior to the pandemic, which I think we've been able to, because so many of those structures were put into place. Our response to students' need was able to be made pretty quickly. And to the credit of our elementary school teams, our principals, and our content specialists, who went through all of our data, our DIBELS data, our Mcas data, and they put students into groups, and based off of exact needs, and they'll go into 6-week targeted groups based off of what we're determining and prioritizing. Kind of a silver lining to pandemic, to the last year's remote time, was that we were able to get a tremendous amount of training for staff. And due to a lot of the training, especially our Wilson training, our RAVO training, these really explicit reading programs, we have so many staff who work in our Tier 2 and even our classroom teachers who are able to provide kind of real-time support to students right away. And so I think when we're looking at the things that came out of it on the positive, I think our immense amount of training really supported the students. In terms of kind of equity to how we're addressing student needs, we worked at the district level with all of our kind of building data teams to look at student profiles and determine that if a student is identifying as in needing intensive support in this test, that kind of profile is assigned to the exact same learning plan across all 7 buildings. And so any student who's kind of having a certain gap, we're addressing it in the same systematic way. So we're ensuring that any student, no matter what school that they go into, is receiving the same support in that way. And so I think it speaks a lot to the collaboration of our elementary teams. Our middle school.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
I'm going to ask a question.
Yeah.
Because
I didn't call on you, but okay. All right, fine. Dr. Crowley.
how often, can you talk a little bit about the win block, what it means, and how
Sure.
often it's happening?
Yep. So the win block is the what I need block. It happens in our elementary schools, K to 5, 3 times a week for 45 minutes. And during that time, there is no new instruction provided. Every student is being provided a small group which is targeted to their needs. And I put up as an example, we have Tier 1 groups of students, so students who, like this, are a lot of our students who are in the green and who are in the blue, who don't need to have any kind of remediation. They're getting targeted support in areas that are helping them exceed. And then for students who require having their kind of a double dose of a foundation, so if they need to have foundations again, if they need Wilson reading, if they need RAVO, they get it during this block of time, so they're not being removed from moving forward in general classroom instruction. This is the time that's just spent on that kind of targeted work. This has also provided us an opportunity for students, like our special education students, who receive specially designed instruction, are also then, during wind block, getting kind of another dose of that. And so we're really working hard to have a full inclusive model where all students are receiving an additional amount of support as needed. And I'll talk about, we're very fortunate that we spent a lot of time last spring building out the structure for our middle schools, and we'll talk about it because it looks a little different. Does that answer it?
Thank you.
No, thank you. All right. So when talking with our elementary leadership team, we just talked about the things that they're doing in response to the Mcas data, as well as all of our diagnostic data as a whole. And just to kind of go over the gist of what is here, our elementary principals are meeting with, during staff meeting time, they're looking at the data of the school. This is where they're really getting into looking at the item analysis. What are the questions that 75% of our fourth graders got wrong? They're looking at it as a holistic approach of an entire building. It's not just that fourth grade class. Where did that skill start in first grade? And are we making sure that our first grade teachers know to prioritize it? They're also working with their kind of to support their wind block time, as well as we have started this year kind of district-wide grade level meetings, again, kind of coming out of last year. The last Tuesday of every month. All of our second grade teachers, third grade teachers across the district meet virtually with one of the elementary principals, and that's when they're making sure that they're collaborating. This is where we're ensuring that our scope and sequence is the same, as well as they're analyzing the data across the district. Our middle school, so this is our current 6, 7, and 8. And again, I think that our trends continue to look the same. There is a decrease in scores across, but it is minimal or much less in our ELA as we're looking at our math. I think to the same point with science, I think we also go to a big piece of our scope and sequence, where we left off in science of March. If students missed their unit on motion and they didn't get it, haven't gotten it back yet and they're not seeing it, we're building in a lot of those vertical sequential pieces. I'm going to actually preface to my next conversation. Last spring, we met as a middle school leadership team. We had our coordinators and our middle school principals, and anticipating our return to this fall, knew that we needed to build the similar structures to that of our elementary. And so we built out the wind block, which happens 5 days a week in our 6th grade. And we have worked to use IXL data to determine groups and do targeted instruction for all of our 6th grade students. And I'll talk about what we're doing to target in 7 and 8. We knew and have known that our math data, that our students were going to show more significant gaps. And so with that, we the coordinators and the principals met with their middle school teams to analyze our math IXL data and determine our next steps. I say that just because I think that it's, there's a lot of students that we're supporting in math. We built the structures and to support them, and we've had a lot of success just from the start of our school year. Much to the credit of our middle school principals, who have really been champions in moving this intervention model up into our middle schools, which is something that is new. We've had a lot of positive feedback from our staff and from our students. Out of all of our middle school groups, we have 13 WIN groups that are targeting math skills. That's 5 days a week that they're getting targeted math instruction based off of their needs from our IXL data. So when thinking about our teaching teams, we have many history teachers, science teachers that all looked at and knew what the needs were of our students and are all teaching math during that block because they recognize the need for it. And so I think it's really kind of speaks to an all hands on deck. We're very fortunate that our 6th grade team has not been departmentalized until now, so many of them have been math educators in the past, and so for them this was an easy, a relatively easy lift. But we are targeting math skills in our 6th grade as well as an additional reading skills for students who need it. Our 7th and 8th grade students have our reading teachers are using our Mcas and our IXL data to pull remedial groups as needed, as well as we're using IXL with our coordinators and our content teachers who are building out lessons that are targeted for students in the Tier 1 classroom. So this is current 9/11. The science in 2019, the middle school and the high school were split. Well, some was doing next generation, some was doing the previous test, and then for last year they were not required to take it, and so the data was not clean enough for us to look across the two, so I didn't put it up here. Again, I think we're looking at the same relative trends. Again, the bulk of our shifting has happened in our yellows and our greens, where we're seeing our students in kind of that threshold in their shift. At the high school level, our targeted intervention looks a little bit different, but there's also a lot of pieces that are the same. All of our English and math teachers have been provided with the students who did not pass the Mcas so that they can be targeting and supporting those students as needed during class time, as well as where feasible, they've been enrolled in the Mcas math and English course. Our EL and special education teachers have been informed of students and they're targeting their support, as well as the students themselves. When looking at the learning loss and the gaps, a lot of this work is happening during our departmental time. So just as an example, we invested in a new math curriculum last year, SAVAS. We happen to have extra components of the program in our middle schools that we brought up to our high school. They're mapping in the 8th grade standards in with their 9th grade skills, and so we're targeting students as needed, as well as we have tutoring after school. When kind of thinking and looking at what I think is one snapshot of a day, I think that what we've really focused on is that we knew that we would need to address the data. We knew that we would be adjusting our practice. We've built many structures and invested a lot of time into the support beforehand, which I think provided us with the opportunities when we returned to feel really equipped to address the needs of the students that are in front of us. We are constantly supporting and training staff with the most high quality materials and creating as many opportunities for us to be collaborating across grade levels and schools to ensure that we're maintaining pace as well as addressing the needs as they arise.
Okay. Let's let Ms. Young take a breath. All right. Mr. Lipset.
Thank you for a comprehensive presentation. Just a couple of quick questions. First, so one of the biggest discussion points going into last school year was in terms of virtual versus hybrid in person. I'm wondering, did we look at the data based on virtual and person? Was there a differential there in terms of the scores for Mcas, for our own measures?
Yep.
What was it?
So I would say that there was not necessarily a consistent pattern that would have delineated it either way. Okay. There are buildings where virtual students outperformed in-person students and buildings where it was the opposite. I would say that as a whole, we did not see a gigantic difference between the performance of the two.
My understanding is that matches what we saw statewide as well. So
yes. I would say that we match statewide trends pretty closely.
So, talking about the large number of in-district measures and diagnostics that we perform, yep. When we're looking at these and analyzing, when principals and teachers are sort of digging into this, if we have data where our in-school measures disagree with what we're seeing from Mcas, how do we square that circle? How do we sort of understand what we're doing and how to address it given that difference?
Yes. So we are working, and so I'm going to just pull back just to refer to it. But the class analytics, what it's linked to is a spreadsheet, ostensibly, and we can measure anything that we want to. And so we've been talking quite a bit. We did a lot of work starting at the elementary, we moved into the middle school, where we're talking about really putting our common assessments and any assessment measure that we have kind of as a measurable, in part because it gives us the opportunity to look at the scores of any assessment based off of state assessment data. And so it can tell us two things. Either our assessment is too rigorous, it's the right level of rigor, it's not assessing the standards in the way that we want it to. So I think there's kind of two pieces. One, it gives us the opportunity to make sure that when we are taking the time out of class to assess students, that it's getting us what we want, and that it's a worthwhile assessment tool. And I also think that it's telling us, I guess we look at what is the purpose of the assessment. Because I don't think that, and I would say this all times, I don't think that we're not teaching to a test, we're teaching to the standards. And ostensibly, the assessment tool measures how well we got there. And so I think it's really a measure of how well our assessments are teaching to the standards and how they would relate.
So would you say that we use Mcas then sort of as a benchmark for our own measures? We sort of refer back to Mcas, and that's how we sort of decide, are we being too rigorous, or are we being not rigorous enough?
I think it's a constant tool for us to use as a comparison, right? I think with all things are a snapshot in one day in time.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things that I really like about what we've been doing under your leadership, under Wendy Sprague's leadership, under Dr. Crowley's leadership, is the formative assessment that we do on a regular basis, which gives us a much, I think, more complete picture of our students than a once-a-year MCAS assessment. So I'm just sort of curious as to how those two interact. And that actually just leads into my last question, which is, MCAS, we've discussed, we've debated on a number of occasions. One of the things that I think is a weakness for MCAS is that it has become kind of the standard that the public uses to judge our schools. And MCAS is, I think, by anyone's reckoning, an imperfect tool. And I'm wondering how we can use the data that we're collecting in order to message better. Right? When MCAS scores are released, there's a flood of media. We rank our schools. We sort of publicize, or not we, but the media and the outside world sort of publicizes where our schools land. And I mean, the data that we collect on a regular basis seems to me to be at least something that we should be talking about publicly alongside that, in order to provide a little bit more of a complete picture when MCAS scores are released. So I'm wondering if there's been any thinking internally about how we might be able to do that going forward, so the public understands we're doing more than just MCAS, that we are really guiding our students through the material in ways that we're responding on a regular basis to their needs, and that we can show that. Because I think the data that we are collecting is really powerful, and it would be great if that was also data that the public could see.
Yeah, we talk a lot about using the word a student profile, right? And that MCAS are, of course, because they're a measurable in which we gather a part of that profile, but the profile is about much, much more, and it's it's taking the whole picture into account.
So could you go to the slide prior to this one? So this is my favorite slide. And, I mean, they're all great.
If you were to pick a favorite slide.
If I were to pick a favorite slide of all time. No,
Wow.
No, genuinely, because I think it goes to what your question was. What we're trying to do here is build a learner profile from kindergarten on up. And so by the time students do have to take MCAS at grade 3, 4, 5, we're going to know their strengths and weaknesses because we've internally collected data throughout.
Yeah.
And so in real time. And so that we're pivoting every 6 weeks to put kids where they need to be.
Yeah.
And so our thinking is that our internal metrics will help the external metric. And this then allows Courtney was on the teacher dashboard. Teachers are able to see in real time how their students are doing. Principals are able to see in real time, and the district can see in real time what's happening at every school, at every grade. Parents will also be able to see in real time, because when you now have a parent-teacher meeting, the teachers can pull up your individual child and say, here are all the data on your child. And so I think that the intent really is to create an individual plan predicated on data for every single kid in the Woburn Public Schools that's linked to their SASIT. And I think it's a really, really powerful way to think about meeting the individual needs of all of our students, because they are so different. And so That's why I think this slide is so powerful. You can also disaggregate, like Ms. Young was talking about, and look at different subgroups as needed, and then have real meaningful conversations around who's getting what they need where, and try to address it from a data perspective, not an anecdotal, we think that this might be a good idea perspective. So that's really, that's why this is my favorite slide. So, but it's taken a long time to get to this point.
Yes.
And so,
Well, I think to your point, I think it makes personalized learning an easier tool to get to. You know, I've met with the elementary data team leaders, I've met with middle school data team leaders, and I say all the time, like, not that it doesn't worry me when you see all the different colors up there, but I feel like I feel really fortunate that we're able to get it really quickly and that we're able to respond and that we have all of the staffing and the resources that we need to address it. Like, I feel like a sense of like we can do this, and I think that's really important.
Okay, Ms. Cormier?
I have a quick question about the win blocks.
Yes.
You said they're small groups. How are you defining small group? Is that based on the classroom size, or is that like throughout the district it's the same?
Sure. So small groups are prioritized first by students who are in our groups of greatest need. And then we have some of our groups, for example, of our students who are on level learning might have a larger, I guess, cohort, but they're pulled for smaller group time within that space. We are, and I think we've talked about this before, still very much looking to fill our interventionist positions, and I think until we fill them in full, some of our buildings have the full structure that we need, and some we're still looking for. But the intention would be that there is, with full staffing, that they would be smaller. However, we've ensured that if there are larger, I guess, cohorts of groups of students, that they're students who are then receiving smaller groups of time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Wells?
Yeah, hi. Could you explain the number of students that took the exam last year versus the year before? Was there a big significant difference in the number of students taking the exam?
I would have to get the full number. However, I would, knowing from Virtual Academy, that the number of students in Virtual Academy opting out of the assessment was definitely more than our principals had seen before.
Okay.
So I would say the number would be declined. I don't know the exact statistic. I'll have to get back to you.
So the most significant thing that I got out of it was the difference in the ELA and math.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of hints at a systemic math issue that transcends, the pandemic and so forth, because the students that were there in the pandemic and the teaching was taking place, they were in the same classroom and they were learning their English and math, but there was a significant, things like this, real difference in what they're either retaining, obtaining in terms of math and English.
So I would say, I guess, two pieces. I would say that, like statewide, that's a consistent measure that the ELA is higher, and that was also consistent with the measures of where we saw the shift. Our ELA scores have been higher in the past than our math scores, and we spent a lot of time going back and auditing programming pre-pandemic time and realigning in vertical alignment, and was also a big reason why when we were doing our purchasing, that we prioritized purchasing new programming for our middle and high school in math. And so we've worked really hard to realign that and have that work done through this year. So I would anticipate, given the investment that we've made in programming, that we would see an increase. It's difficult during this time to really map it, but that would be my anticipation.
Okay. The other thing, and I don't know whether it was just because you were trying to do it, but one of your graphs, the color scheme was not the same as throughout the whole. It was
Trying to
just
really get under
IXL.
right now.
Yeah, the IXL, because when I was looking at it, I don't know whether that's just because you were trying to get it, and it's.
Well, I want you to know how hard I tried to.
No, that's fine, but, because consistency and everything just makes it easier for people to understand.
Cutting the paper and trying to straighten them.
No, it's just the color scheme, like the red, green, and blue
were slightly
changed
different.
on the IXL.
Next time you should send it to Dr. Wells. So that
I know.
Um,
Thank you.
The other thing I was wondering about is, because, the way you're doing analysis, but you should be able to find, for lack of pots of gold in this data, like places where somebody is really teaching something very well,
Yeah.
and export that to the whole system. So,
Yes.
I think that's one of the benefits of doing all this data analysis is to identify the teachers or the method that somebody's using to pick that nugget and then disseminate that throughout their system.
Yes, so part of the purpose of of finding the space for our grade level teams to meet, but we also have the same structure happening where our middle school departments now, instead of having the meetings in separate buildings on different days, they're running all those virtually so that both buildings, 7th grade, are meeting at the same time. And so I think that opening up Google Meets has provided us the access to have those conversations much more readily.
But that's what I would suggest that maybe in a future report, point out the things that you've dug down and identified, good or bad, because that validates the use of the data. Data is good to collect, but it's only good to collect if you're going to use it to do stuff. And I think highlighting the things that you've identified in future reports would be beneficial to the committee and to the city, because they were spending all this money and saying, this is what we've identified, and we're going to use this to do X, Y, and Z. I kind of agree with the superintendent's liking that. And I'm thinking, maybe monthly or quarterly or whatever, the committee just sees a dashboard representation of, here's how our students should do it, you guys figure it out. But like looking at progression over time, let's say, in January, or, we say, okay, here's our Dibble scores from September to January, and here's how it's changed.
Right.
And we, that way, getting back to Mr. Lipset, say, we emphasize, here's what we're seeing in the system. And so something like that. Just making that a regular feature every quarter or something like that. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Let's see. And the other thing I was thinking about is, this is all identifiable, but if we created a de-identified set that you could utilize, we have a lot of teaching schools around here, and they could do a lot of analysis for you and do things that, we don't have the time to do, but thinking about how we could make it a de-identified data set so that we could have people in UMass Lowell, say, who are working in education and students that want to dig down, and they could help you identify things that, you just don't have the time to do. So, thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Wells. Mr. Kissel?
A couple of questions that most have been asked, so I'll just cut to a couple. You mentioned early on, this isn't going to happen overnight, it's a multi-year fix. Just if there's an answer to it, what do you think? I mean, are we talking, what would you say? Just for, because we're talking also some 10th graders here that obviously, we're going to be moving on to college in a couple of years. Do you think it's a year or two, or just kind of, it's obviously happened across the world, this situation.
I think for every student, it's different.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that for some students, for us to identify and kind of support their needs and kind of fill in some gaps quickly, and for some students, it might, there might be some things that they're gathering over time. I think I look at it more as that we are going to have to make sure that all of our teachers are looking back at what were the skills that were beforehand and really assessing previous skills to know, like, these are the skills that they're going to have mastery of in order to be able to do this task. So I think it's hard to make a general number. I think it's just that, we talk about this a lot with staff, that, we're going to target and we're going to do the best that we can, but there's also going to be some students that we're going to continue to support, in that way moving forward. And I think that recognizing that for a lot of students, especially in that kind of tier 2, that middle group, that for some of them, it just might take a little bit longer.
Yeah. Okay.
And to Dr. Wells' point earlier, exactly, if there's best practices at a particular school, we've got these kind of identified this way. I think that's important because, I mean, go back a few years and where people that were buying houses in certain parts of the city because of the Mcas scores, saying, well, that's a good school to be part of because of, that particular Mcas data and so on. So, similar in fashion here. People will be looking at this and, oh, they're fixing the issues quicker. I want to move my kid over, whether, we don't allow it, but there'll be some movement in the city, I'm sure. But, no, I think this is great. And again, Dr. Wells mentioned, it'd be nice to have more of an update as we go through the year.
Absolutely.
Kind of keep up on it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Kissel. Mr. Mulrennan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, Ms. Young, thank you very much for this. A lot of work put into it. The slide after this, Courtney, I think is, if you could just bring your attention to the right-hand side for refreshment of the audience at home and perhaps parents that are new to all this. And again, we don't want them all freaking out over MCAS scores. Just kind of go down that column, if you would, and explain those other programs that we're running and other activities that you folks are using to judge the students.
Sure. So our DIBELS, we get the DIBELS 8th edition. We've expanded that actually. We used to give that K1 and 1. We now give it K to 5. That is one of the screening tools that was approved by DESE's dyslexia guidance. And so we use that as our tool for identifying deficits in early literacy skills. And we've extended that for all of our K-5 learners. And that's really the data that we collected as soon as we came back in September, and we prioritized getting that data done, which was a tremendous effort. And so we have exact measures really of where all our learners are. MCAS, which we know. IXL, we have in grades 1 through 8. We have ELA and math at the elementary level, and we have all 4 content areas, ELA, math, science, and history in the middle schools. And this is a tool where students take what we call a diagnostic assessment, but then it actually aligns with all of our programs. So we align it with STEM scopes, for example, and when we get to a unit in STEM scopes, students will be practicing online on their own, kind of problems that go along with it, and it will track their data, and then teachers can go through and see if a student is struggling with something and assign them anything to practice. The writing, we have writing on demand prompts that we give. We give 6 over the course of the year, and we give those K through 8. We have our DRAs, which is our reading assessment, which gives us a comprehensive look of students' comprehension skills. Foundations is our phonics program, and we've added this to the spreadsheet for the first time this year, so we're going to kind of see what that looks like, but this will give us a really good comparison for students comparative to their DIBEL scores. And then our math assessments, we have common assessments that all teachers give at the end of each unit that we align to all the standards. We have those to be given paper-based, but we also have generated all those through Google Forms, so we can give them electronically, and that measures against the program that we're teaching.
I think that's very, very, very helpful as a refresher, and if I could just back you up to the beginning of your presentation, how you were indicating how we had investments in our staffing. If you could just kind of go through a couple of those positions and maybe some of their roles and how beneficial they have been to the district.
Sure. I think first and foremost, I go to our middle school group. I think that this year we have representation in all 4 of those major content, our ELA, math, science, and history. And I think that was a tremendous piece of our ability to have our WIN block get up and started. We had the support of principals, but also every single teacher and every single team had a person in the content area that was able to support them with instruction and looking at data. And I think that it's absolutely the partnership between kind of having those 4 team members that met for all those teachers with our principals that made this a much easier lift when I think that intervention in a middle school is difficult. And then we invested in content specialists, which are viewed often as kind of like a reading specialist, but they support all content areas. They are the ones that look through all of the data. They meet bi-weekly as a district level to ensure that we are approaching all of our kind of our targeting in the exact same way. as well as we invested in instructional coaches, our innovation coaches, who support both our middle and our high school around all content area, but also in instructional technology, and has made it so that a lot of our assessments can be done digitally, which has been a big impact. I'm sure that I forgot something.
No, I
but-
appreciate all of those. It's just, like you said, we had those in place, and the benefit to the district, has been phenomenal. And again, it showed here, so I appreciate your time for that. Thank you.
We could absolutely not do this without all of them. This would not, or it would take a much longer time without them, as well as without them being as strong of educators that they are.
And although you did indicate there are some gaps and some needs that you have in your department, you're going to work forward, moving forward, so, we'll see how that goes. Thank you. I'm all set, Madam.
Thank you, Ms. Mulren. Anyone else? You? Yes, Dr. Wells?
Yeah, thank you. So you were just listing those, and I just want to emphasize, because you did, but maybe the audience didn't hear that, because lots of times people think they're doing so many assessments, nobody's learning anything. But you emphasize the fact that the assessments are to make sure the students are learning the standards that we've determined are what they need to learn.
Yes.
Yeah, and so eventually, I think the superintendent alluded to, is when you come to a parent-teacher's night, you're going to use those assessments essentially as like the report card.
Yes.
Yeah, and so I think, so when we, audience are hearing about all these assessments, it's really to make sure that the students are learning what we think they should be. It's not just to have more assessments so they'll do better on the Mcas. It's really to learn the standards, which is the educational thing. Because sometimes people hear, they're taking 10 assessments, how can they learn anything? But that's not the purpose of it.
And to your point, I think that moving students up a progression is really important, and that if a student is coming in and their writing skills are at a first grade level in fourth grade, you can't expect them to get the fourth grade standard right away, and you need to know what to give them next in order to build them there, and that's what this gives you, for sure.
Mrs. Chisholm?
So as far as COVID has created a habit for everybody, but for the students at the high school that did not pass what we said the Mcas, the requirements for graduation, when is that going to be, or is it, or will it be, or do we have time to get those kids to be able to be up to speed?
Yeah, I spoke to Ms. Callahan today. Because MCAS was not the requirement for last year, we have no students in I guess jeopardy at this time, and that any of our students who did not pass previously, they have significant interventions in place.
Okay, so nobody should fear that this is not going to take place, but we'll have time for the kids that were actually sophomores that took it to catch up to graduation.
Yes, and they have significant interventions for any students that they're concerned about.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I just had a question. So it looks like the wind block, when they're added to the wind block, they're assessed right off the bat, and then 6 weeks later they're assessed again.
Yes.
So you're able to target exactly if the intervention is effective.
Yes.
And if it's not, then the student repeats, or?
So the process that we have for identification is that a student that goes into a remedial group, if they are targeting, if they using DIBELS, for example, is red or yellow, they actually get assessed every 2 weeks. And that's also part of the dyslexia guidance is frequent progress monitoring. And if you, at the end of those 6 weeks, if a student is not showing progress, then they actually will shift and change an intervention, because oftentimes what it means is that if for 6 weeks there was no gains, then you are assigning them the wrong support. And so they'll go through and they'll be into a new group, and they'll be getting a targeted intervention. We have different tools that do different things that will support and will measure. I think that a lot of this lends itself to kind of our student support teams at all of our different levels, where we're constantly looking at student data. And so this provides us with the opportunity to be kind of trying out a lot of different things that are targeted over the course of time.
And in doing that, you're catching reading difficulties early on, and not only catching the reading difficulty, but the actual piece, like comprehension or phonics, right? You're actually catching the piece?
So we've had, if after 4 weeks, if you have a group of students where you have 5 students and 4 of them have shown that they're making progress and 1 is not, that we've had content specialists, Title I teachers, support in the building, immediately take that student and start to begin a different intervention for them. So as we're recognizing even within mid-cycles, if there's students who aren't responding appropriately, then we make adjustments right away. Yes.
And is it so narrow that if you're a student that is in Tier 1 in terms of ELA, but Tier 2 in math, because for whatever reason, are you able to individualize it to that extent?
Yes. So we prioritized reading in cycle 1. We have, a little bit of math, but really we recognized that we needed to work on reading with a lot of students upon the return, especially in our younger grades. And then we have students who will, moving forward, if, for example, if you have a student who we're recognizing needs support with math and reading, that will do 2 days of ELA and 1 day of math and have an additional time that they have it. So we customize and create kind of personalized opportunities based off of the things that they need.
And just, of course, I'm worried about the vulnerable populations, and I'm just wondering if maybe a subcommittee could look at some of the trends that are impacting EL students or students that use IEP services, just because, just to make sure there's no significant gaps. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Any further questions for Ms. Young? No, Dr. Crowley.
Pardon me, it's not really a question, but it's just, what you see is academic data for tonight, because that's what we're looking at. One of the things, and this was just made live a couple days ago, and so one of the things that I'm thinking about, we're thinking about, Dr. Baldessari is thinking about, what are some of the social emotional data points that we could add to this learner profile so that all of these points are housed in one place. It's not there yet. I'm just forecasting out the thinking that we have. So I don't know if
Since Courtney put this together, my mind is blown by it. And my compliments to you publicly for this. And the superintendent, the idea of the student profiles we've talked about for a long time, and it's becoming a reality. But you see the bottom line there, like the low income. Ever since we looked at that yesterday, I was just kicking it around in my mind. There are so many other factors that we can explore in our kids' lives, aside from just their income status or their ability to speak the language. Our kids who are from single-parent households, our kids who are receiving counseling services, our kids who have obviously special education status. There's so many different factors that we can look at, and once we can identify trends in the data, we can then apply the measures, as Ms. Young was saying. So I think that good assessment and good data brings good work, focused work. So really optimistic about the possibilities.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
no doubt.
Dr. Baldessari.
No doubt.
Yeah, this is, honestly, the fact that we're collecting data every 6 weeks on educational progress, and even more so for struggling students, is fantastic for us. Another idea I have is when we do school improvement plans, it'll be very interesting to see how each school is broken down and how they're going to be addressing at a micro level. It'll be really interesting. Okay. Mr. Lipset.
Just one quick follow-up and sort of more of a future agenda item, but it would be great to get an update on social emotional issues throughout the system. I know that I've seen a lot of stuff this year bubble up, but I'm sure that's been happening in our school, in Woburn schools as well. And so just sort of getting a sense of where we are, what kinds of responses we're seeing, what kind of manifestations we're seeing, and how we're responding to them would be great.
And I can give you some community data as well from Winchester Hospital on the community board there.
Yeah.
There's a lot out there to talk about.
So would you want that as an agenda item, or should that go to a subcommittee? What do you think, Dr. Baldessari? Is it?
If I do it in SSA,
Yeah.
and then it goes to the committee, I think that's a good vehicle.
Sure.
I mean, it's pre-existing.
Yeah.
And,
All right, thank you.
And
As
then
I
the
say,
SSA can decide if they want, if Colleen would like to present it, or
Mm-hmm.
if they'd like a larger.
yeah, all right, thank you. Dr. Wells?
Yeah, along the same lines, Baldessari. But there, and I think this is a place, again, where we work with maybe some of the universities. There are a lot of assessments for emotional well-being, and I could easily see that be given in a health class, and I think it's an underutilized asset, and I think highlighting it is an important
Yeah,
thing.
and we do. We
Yeah.
have a number of assessments that we provide for students as part of our,
Right.
other
But I'm saying the entire student
Yeah.
population,
Yeah.
because, if you're overwhelmed with the special needs populations and so forth, but we have a whole entire school population, which we could benefit, seeing how the general feeling of the students and things like that, well-being.
And Dr. Wells, we did just receive our YRDS results too.
Okay.
So
Yep.
we'll have that information for you as
Yep.
well.
Okay, good.
Great, thank you, Dr. Wells, for bringing that up, and Mr. Lipset as well. All right, are we ready to move on, or we have anything else on MCAS and data trends? Okay. COVID updates. Dr. Crowley, I just want to outline that the constituent had public commented concerns about
Sure.
the communication regarding COVID, just reminding everybody.
So I'm going to give you a macro look at COVID in the Woburn Public Schools. Mr. Alcanada has more data to provide, and then happy to answer any questions that the committee has. Before I start, as I start, I just want to thank everybody in the Woburn Public Schools because we are doing a great job at school mitigating against the spread of COVID-19. What we're doing is working. The masks are working. The kids are wearing masks. We're not seeing any problems relative to masks. The teachers are doing a great job of keeping doors open, going outside. The HEPA filters have helped. And so all of this sort of layered approach has been effective. And I say that because tonight we currently have 5 cases of COVID-19 in the Woburn Public Schools. It's students. There are 0 staff positives right now. So, and what we're seeing are kids contracting COVID, usually from parents at home. And that really has been what we've seen last spring and what we're seeing currently. We do use, I'm not projecting it because it's identifiable data, but we are using the dashboard, the same type of dashboard. So when a student is positive, the way it works is that we're asking families to communicate to the schools. The nurses then put it into a system that then triggers the dashboard so that we're looking at data in real time to make decisions. We had to do this all of last year. I think I shared the dashboard last year. We're continuing to use it. It works so that the folks that need to see the data to make decisions can. So the principals can see their schools, and then we can see the district. And so I want to thank the nurses because they've been doing a great job of staying on top of it and communicating with families as the needs arise. Every Monday, there is a leadership meeting with the mayor, the chief of police, the chief of the fire department, the DPW lead, and we compare notes as to what trends we see in the city. And that being said, the current positivity rate in the city of Woburn is 1.92 as of tonight. So that's a decrease since last week. So the collaboration has been outstanding with the Woburn Board of Health. We've run multiple vaccine clinics at the high school. They are ready, willing, and able to roll it out at the middle schools. One of the concerns or questions is the kids, most of the 6th graders aren't yet 12 years old, so they're not eligible for a vaccine. So we're waiting to see when that may be a reality, and we will run vaccine clinics at the middle schools when the vaccine becomes available. Weekly, we report our results to DESE, both staff and student positives, and on our website, If you go under Health Services, it links directly to the DESI website, so that if anyone in this room or at home wants to see what our weekly case count is, they can see right from the DESI website what we've reported. And and Mr. Alcanada will give you the statistics. We have opted into the Test and Stay program, and I think it's at 29%, right? But I don't want to steal your thunder, but it's gone up from 24 to 29% of people that have opted into the Test and Stay. I know that the pool testing was brought up tonight. That's something that the state has been offering last spring and then this fall as well. It's been vetted by our school nurses. The feeling from them was that we just didn't have the capacity to handle that effectively. And if just recently, Governor Baker is calling out the National Guard to help schools do the pool testing because it's an overwhelming task. And so we can opt into the pool testing in the future. It's always an option. But that has been where we are as it relates to the Test and Stay and the pool testing. So
Only 29% of parents would opt in, right? I mean, if they opted into Test and Stay, they would have to opt into pool testing too?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Okay.
So that's my macro overview. Mr. Alcanada can
Sure.
provide details.
Sure. Well, let's start at the high school, and I want to thank Principal Justin Callanan and the nurses there, Jane Snedeker and Allison Price, for helping me to put some of this information together. As of yesterday, 64% of the students at the high school are vaccinated. If we add the staff in there, we're at approximately 68% fully vaccinated. There are a number of students who are partially vaccinated. Assuming they were to become fully vaccinated, that would bring our numbers up to almost 73%. There's, at the high school, approximately 95% of the staff are vaccinated. So there's only a handful that are not vaccinated, and so they're not going to move that needle very much at this point. Assuming that the partially vaccinated students follow through and become fully vaccinated, at this point, for us to reach 80%, we would need an additional 115 students to become fully vaccinated. And if we wanted to get to 82, and I just picked that number, 82%, to give us a little flexibility, we'd need another approximately 140 students to be vaccinated. So that is where we currently are with those vaccinations. In talking about the Test and Stay, as you know, parents need to consent in order for our nurses to test a child in the Test and Stay program. On September 14th, 29 days ago, I reported to you that we were at 24%. That has risen in the past 4 weeks to 29%. We saw the biggest rise in the elementary school that went from 30% last month to 39% this month. And to more fully answer your question, Madam Chair, if we were to opt into the test and pool, we would have to do a new round of consents, and everybody who consented this would have to reconsent, if there is such a word. In terms of the Test and Stay, we have had 7 opportunities to have children go into the Test and Stay program, if you will. But we were only able to test 4 times because the other 3 instances did not provide their consent. In terms of the symptomatic, and that symptomatic would be for anyone, staff and student, we have performed 16 tests. We have performed 11 tests. We could have performed 16, but we didn't have consent. All of those tests, the Test and Stay and the symptomatic, have all come back negative. So cross our fingers, knock on wood, they've all come back negative. And the final data point I'll provide is, as you know, on a weekly basis, we are testing staff that have not been vaccinated, and we're testing about 50 across the district. I think we've done this now for 4 weeks. It feels like we've done it for 4 Fridays. Again, 0 positive test. Everything has come back negative. So a lot of different data points, but just wanted to sort of amplify Dr. Crowley's comments, just to indicate that hopefully our mitigation factors will continue to work the way they have for over a year.
Thank you. Dr. Wells?
Yeah, so have we done anything like, I think it was suggested one of the, and I think we did it last year, just sending out like a sheet of paper, if you have these symptoms, you should stay home and things like that. Have we done anything for the parents, saying, like that?
Yeah, I think we have done that on multiple times, whether we're mostly through the nurses. Certainly, there's information all over the place, and we're encouraging people, if they have certain symptoms or if they feel ill at all, stay home, please.
Then there was alluded to something at the Kennedy School. I don't know. In one of the emails we got, was there an incident or something, a gathering that?
Yeah, Mrs. O'Brien had concerns about the National Honor Society, and it wasn't mitigated in her email that I'll publicly acknowledge now, Ms. Valerie O'Brien. And she was concerned about the crowding, and
so mistakes are going to happen, or people, we're in an era that it's, things are changing and so forth. So I think the important thing for us to learn is, if this isn't, review it. If we could have done things better, let's do things better, because we're going to have other gatherings, because we're trying to make things as well. So learn from the past, that's all, I'll say, and I hope the administration will just review the incident and make changes as appropriate. Because that's all you can do.
Yes, I forwarded the email to Dr. Crowley.
Yeah, so I've spoken to it was a National Honor Society event at the Kennedy, and so we will review the protocols.
Right, 'cause that's all you can do. You can't change the past. And then in terms at the high school, have they surveyed the students to find out, is there going to be movement, or is the students just, the families are just...
Quick answer is yes, we did. So when we were organizing with the Board of Health to run the last vaccine clinic, Ms. Callahan put out a survey to the students trying to gauge interest, and we had, I think, maybe 35 to 40 students say yes, they would be interested, but then only a dozen got parent permission, and so so we've tried to do it that way as well.
Okay, it's not much you can do. Yeah, okay. And then in terms of when there's a need to contact parents, have we thought about I think probably we have everybody's email now, like just having a packet ready, you just load that packet into the email and hit send to the parent, the parents that are contacted or something like that. Just say, here's the things to do. Because it sounds, from what the woman was saying, we've all been in a situation, you get a call, it's important, and you're in the middle of something else, and you're trying to juggle two things. So I think to try to make it easier, either...
So the phone call is a personalized, it's situational.
Right.
And then in this case, the Harold Wyman sent out a correspondence to the families that didn't require a phone call.
Right, but it had like all the information that's needed or whatever.
Right.
Even, you could send that, blast that to everybody, but, and say if it's relevant, here's all the information. I just want to, increase the communication. Okay, thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Kissel?
Bob, you had mentioned about 95% of the staff at the high school. I'm assuming it's everybody, lunch custodian.
Everybody
across
who
the
works
board.
in the building.
So
yes.
how many aren't? What's the 5% number? I don't know what the number is at the high school.
There's about 9 staff members
Okay.
who are not vaccinated.
And they're doing the Friday testing?
Yes.
Now, is that only required, I'm sorry, is that required at the school, or if they did it on their own over the weekend?
No, we have to test
It has to
them
be on
on
okay.
Friday.
And the answer comes back by Monday.
Oh, 15
Within
15 minutes, right?
Yeah, I think it's
Okay.
within 10 or 15 minutes, the nurse knows the result.
Okay. And, yeah, that's cool. And then at 68%, including the staff, the 80% that the state was mentioning,
Right.
is that including every person in that building, so staff included, not just the student population, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we're only at like 68%. You said it'd be about 140 more
73.
students?
Yeah, yes, I'm going to presume that, we're at the max for staff vaccination.
Yeah, yeah,
So, assuming that all of the current students who are in the process of becoming vaccinated, were they to become fully vaccinated, then at this point, and this number will fluctuate with students coming in and leaving, but we would need another 115 students to
Yeah.
become vaccinated to hit 80, and then another 140 or so to get to 82%.
Okay, and those students, did you say, have one dose already,
There are,
or are they not at all?
yep, there are 59 partially vaccinated
Okay.
students. So what I'm doing, I'm taking all the vaccinated, assuming the partially become vaccinated, then after that, we need an additional 115 to get to 80%.
Gotcha, okay. And I know we'll obviously be talking about that, I think, at the next meeting, about the date, which the state had moved a little bit for that 80% to
Oh,
reevaluate.
the masks,
The
yes.
masks, I'm sorry,
I don't think
masks.
we can have a meeting about masks if we're below 80% and we
Yeah,
can't
that's what I was wondering.
discuss it anyways.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, I think we do have, the way it was, we do have to do something because,
Oh, because our policy says we will.
well, that's what we said, and I think we have to evaluate it
For
and
sure.
see what we're going to do.
Well,
Because we could say if they reach 80%. but-
no, that's true, Dr.
Yeah.
Wells. Okay, yeah, absolutely. I think what I was thinking was, the governor said November 1st.
Right.
No.
He
So-
picked the date that I originally picked.
Wow.
He must have called me.
I'm pretty sure Dr. Wells, you said October 31st.
Just one more follow-up,
Mm-hmm.
one more quick question.
Of course, Mr. Kissel.
We had a comment tonight about the Earl Wyman, which you addressed briefly, and I think it was stated that that particular class went remote. Is that what?
No, in her.
No,
her
that was-
dis-
her town.
no.
That was
Oh, in her
the
district. Oh, I
that she was
apologize. I
in.
thought you meant the Earl Wyman, because I figured it was something to talk about.
No.
Okay.
No, she was saying that the pool testing in Lexington, they
Forced one of those
discovered
situations.
those cases.
Gotcha.
Which was
Okay.
her rationale of asking us to.
Excellent. Thank you. That's all I have right now.
And Ms. Cormier.
Thank you for all of these various numbers that
I used to talk about budgets. Now I'm going to talk about COVID.
this is also important. So I was contacted with the letter that the elementary school sends out regarding close contacts, and there were a couple issues, and I spoke to Dr. Crowley about it earlier, and there was conversation about updating it so that it's a uniform letter across the district, which would make sense. One of my issues with it was that it says that the student, if a if a positive, will be in isolation for at least 10 days after their COVID symptoms have subsided, which is not the CDC recommendation.
We'll take a look at that. I mean, our nurses have vetted that, but we'll certainly take a look at that, and if there's an update, we'll put that right in.
Okay. Yeah, it's a minimum of 10 days from when they started. I mean, but if I lose taste and smell, that could be for months.
Of course.
So, and, of course, the fever-free for 24 hours that we usually mention. As far as the test and stay criteria, so if I know that the CDC as well as DESE say that 3 feet, within 3 feet, because we're masked in the children in the schools, that is a close contact. Whereas outside of that, 6 feet is the number. So if I am a student who is a close contact within 6 feet, am I able to opt into the testing?
Yes, you're within 6 feet, but of course, more than 3 feet away.
And if I'm
And if you're
3 feet?
and if you have, if there's an exemption that applies and you don't have to test, but you wanted to, then we would absolutely say, great, we'll do that.
Okay. You had mentioned the exemptions previously, the vaccinated, asymptomatic. So it just said someone who is exposed to a COVID-19 positive individual in the classroom, which meeting those numbers, I guess, is what that is referring to.
Yeah, the exemptions, if you are a close contact, by definition, you are within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes over a 24-hour period. By the CDC standard, you are a close contact. However, then we have the various exemptions provided by DPH and DESE. Those four being, just to remind everybody, is that you're fully vaccinated, that you are in a classroom where you are more than 3 feet away, that you're on a bus. Obviously, everybody needs to be masked on a bus. And then the final one is that if you've had COVID within the last 90 days. If any or all of those exemptions apply, and hopefully not all of them, then you would be exempt from testing and quarantine.
Okay, so I'm looking at this, I don't even know where I got this, testing options for WPS staff and families, and it had two separate under test and say. It said those within 3 to 6 feet of a positive individual with the 15 minutes over 24 hours. It said they were exempt from school testing and quarantine, but that exempt does not mean excluded, right? They are able
That's
to.
right.
Okay.
You're not excluded. If anybody fit into that category and wished to test, we would be happy to do that for their peace of mind, staff and students.
So in the 3 to 6 feet range, you would still you would not quarantine?
Correct.
Okay.
You are exempt.
Because it's not the 3 feet that,
Right.
So if I am within 3 feet, I do need to quarantine outside of school, but I'm
Yes,
testing every time.
If you're in close contact within that 3 feet, then it's a different workflow. It's a different conversation.
Yep, okay. And they are tested over a 7-day period. So if it's a school vacation week, I'm exposed on Friday and we come back 10 days later, maybe I probably take a test when I get back, but I don't have to do the outside testing.
In that situation, that's actually the question. That situation, when you came back, when the student or staff came back, we probably would do one test, where it would be 10 days since that. If it came back negative, I think that would be the only, I don't want to speak for the nurses, but I think one test and you could be done as long as it came back negative.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I just think, that letter, it was definitely confusing to the parents when it talks about the CDC and then it says DESE. It is a CDC recommendation to 3 feet, so I think that would be also appropriate. It just was saying that these certain students were considered, and to me, it seemed like they were being excluded, like that there was not an option for them, so I just wanted to clarify that. I think
The
that was all.
whole process has become very complicated. As I used like to joke, in the old days,
Yes.
last year, if you were a close contact, it was an automatic 10 days of quarantine, but we have various workflows now, depending on, the CDC guidelines and then the DESE, DPH. And then we have a vaccine, and if you're vaccinated, that's probably the best exemption from testing and quarantine. So we have had to adapt to all of those changing recommendations, and as I said, just because you're exempt doesn't mean you're excluded.
Okay.
We'd be happy to do that for anybody.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, any more questions? Yes, Mr. Mulrennan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could, to the superintendent, you've mentioned a lot there, Dr. Crowley, and obviously, with Bob's data tonight, we still have a lot of work ahead of us for the student body up at the high school. Those vaccine clinics, I thought I read somewhere, there's a little bit of incentives out there. Any more ideas on that? A couple of Red Sox tickets, or what are we going to do for that?
I don't know what it'll take, because we
Thanksgiving
did offer gift cards. I think it was a $30 gift card for students to get vaccinated, and for those that are already vaccinated, there was a $200 raffle. And so, Ms. Callahan had talked about different, internal incentives, but I wish I had the answer.
Okay.
I'd give it to you. We're trying to.
What else?
To move the needle,
Obviously, we're trying to reach those
Right.
benchmarks,
Right.
and
Yeah.
Why aren't they, whatever's going on, what's it going to take to get to there?
For what it's worth, that 70% mark is really where the city of Woburn is as well.
Okay.
And so it's not as if the high school is radically
different than
different than the
anyplace
city,
else.
so,
Isn't unexpected.
right,
So-
right.
Thank you, Ms. Mulrennan. And Dr. Wells?
Yeah, so the other thing we have to start considering is the flu, because it's going to mask and mimic COVID symptoms and cause real havoc and so forth. So potentially, working with the State Board of Health, to have flu clinics.
Yeah, we've had that preliminary conversation,
Yeah.
so,
And we should probably also think about working with the nurses, again, reiterating symptomology, contacting, so if people come down with, because, obviously more people, will come down with symptoms that might mimic COVID, but it could be the flu, and testing and so forth, so making sure we kind of prepare for that before it happens, so we're not trying to do it on the fly. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
So it sounds like clarified the protocols with test and stay. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're tightening up the communication to make sure it's consistent.
Yeah.
And you'll update us if we're going to do pool testing, if the National Guard's going to come in. But other than that, we're going to pause on that. And, okay, so I think we addressed all of the issues that we heard. Okay, again, the food service director is out of,
If I can just comment on,
oh, of course.
Ms. Tamayan is ready, willing, and able to come to another meeting in the near future.
Yeah.
Specifically, I think there was 59 pallets that arrived today that she's busy probably still unloading. Not surprising, there's a supply chain issue as it relates to food, and so when we can get the food, we get it. And so that's really the specific issue of why she's unable to be here tonight, but she is happy to come. And I want to again reiterate that since March of 2020, they've been working nonstop. So
Wow.
that will happen.
Thank you, Dr. Crowley.
The pool test, good to say we should do it, but if we're only getting 20-30% people signing up for it.
No, I wasn't, I just,
but what
let us know.
I'm suggesting is, at community, why don't we look at, potentially see the communities that have it, how many people have signed up? Because if we're only going to get 30% and the communities that have it have 90%, it's
Yeah.
much more worthwhile for them to do it as opposed to us, because there's only limited resources we have.
I looked, in Lexington was like 90
Yeah,
something.
Right.
And so
I
it's,
think,
Yeah.
we would have like one
If we
third
had
of
unlimited
the
resources, I'd say, we test everybody every day, and, we'd never have to, but if we're only going to get 30%, and it's a 1% infection rate in the city, what's the likelihood we're going to pick up something that, would be meaningful?
That'd be 4 kids in every class, just about.
When
Okay.
you say resources, is that, I thought the government was paying for these
You need
tests.
people to do it.
Staffing. Staffing
But
is
if the
huge.
National Guard comes in and does it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that might
That's
change.
breaking news, like
Energy.
just
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah, well.
We have to set up a
if
space to
that's-
do, I'm saying, is it worthwhile for the...
The military inside our buildings. I mean, it's just a big,
No, it's
you
not,
know.
but it's just, everything takes effort. And, is this the best way for the administration to spend their time?
I think if they find something
Well,
before,
that's the
I
thing.
think it's worth something.
If you
Well,
find-
it's not on the agenda, so let's move on. Finance
please.
Subcommittee, Mrs. Chisholm.
We'll be meeting on October 20th.
Fantastic. Curriculum and data trends, Mr. Lipset.
We have not met.
All right. And Personnel Subcommittee, Ms. Mulrennan.
Yes, Personnel Subcommittee met earlier this week, Madam Chair. It was on, I got my dates and times straight.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. October 12th here at the Joyce Middle School at 10 a.m. We had in attendance Dr. Crowley, Dr. B, Dr. Nava from the Finance Office, Patty McKinnon from Finance, Ms. Cormier, myself, Ms. Chisholm via Zoom, Marissa Borzadi from HR, Maureen Ryan from the SPED Department, and Ms. Young joined us that morning. The first item we had, and Bob can chime in if he has anything to add, was mostly an administrative person in the Finance Office to deal with our rentals. Obviously, lots of things happening, people are trying to get back in our buildings, now that things have been changing, and we're going to try to hire, we voted 3-0 to forward this favorably to the body tonight, that we allow Bob and his staff to enter an agreement at a $15 an hour rate, Bob, right?
Yes.
Correct? With a cap of
$15,000.
$15,000 caps. Basically what this person will do, and Bob can chime in if he needs to, it's kind of, for those that have been around for a while, Ms. McKinnon in that office was kind of dealing with this among all of her other things, and obviously with all this, you know, you were absolutely right tonight, Bob. He used to just do budgets, now he's doing COVID numbers and vaccines and things like that. So it's just, you know, ideal for some of these things to get off Patty's plate, and this person would be part-time, no salary, it's a 15-hour, I mean, sorry, correction, no benefits.
The people are going to.
Yeah. All of those people, no salary. Anyway, back to.
Called an intern.
Yeah. Oh, an intern. So it's $15 an hour, $15,000 cap. Again, the time constraint isn't anything that requires benefits from our committee, supported, and she will be supervised and answering to Mr. Akinada and Patty at the finance office. And as I stated, that was a 3-0 vote from the subcommittee that morning. So at this time, I entertain a motion to forward that to allow Bob to do his thing.
Well, just for clarification, just, so.
I'm sorry, trial, it is, in my notes, thank you.
Yep.
It's a trial period only to June 30th, and his department will review the situation to see where we go from there.
So
These are my notes, Patty.
you're making a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, so Ms. Chisholm, did you have?
I just want clarification.
Clarify.
This is the trainer that we now have working for us at the high school that will be doing this job
Yeah.
at the high school. So it just, so when people want to rent a building, how will they reach this person? When now they just call the business office?
Yep, so we will have an email address for this person, separate from her athletic trainer.
Okay.
So she'll essentially have 2 email addresses. She'll obviously be continuing her athletic training duties. And we'll work a couple hours a day or whatever it takes to process these.
Will she be working here or at the high school? Just so where would people?
I suspect that she will be at the high school.
Okay.
All of her time.
Okay. And how will people reach her there? You know, as far as for the rentals, how will they get in touch with her? Or is everything going to be done through
Yep.
email?
So I'm not sure that everything will be done through email. I can get back to you on that. She probably has access to a phone, but I think the majority of it can be done through email.
Because just don't want to encourage people to be walking through a high school, you know.
No, we wouldn't.
Yeah,
We
so
wouldn't
that's
want
why I just want to make sure that.
Right, and we'll update our website
Okay.
to direct them to this email address for any type of applications or information in terms of rental of any of the fields or properties.
Okay. So before Patty did this, who was doing? Because I know it was switched to her.
Yeah,
It was.
I'm not. I don't know. It may have been somewhere in facilities or somewhere else in the business office.
All right. So because I just want to make sure there's nobody in house right now that could take on this without adding another.
No, I mean, I think if it was that easy, we probably would
done it.
have shifted that already.
Okay. Thanks.
And I think, as you've indicated as well, the term was fields, but it's also all of our buildings included, right, Bob? The fields at the high
All
school, and
rentals,
also the
yes.
gyms. And the question came up too, that she will work side by side with Rory at Recreation. Again, we have a great partnership with them, so she'll get that, tied in with, from Patty's to Rory at Recs as well.
And we'll still have a financial piece, obviously. Ms. McKinnon will continue to send out invoices, to collect the monies, make sure that it's posted in the proper account. So we'll still have that piece. The administrative duties, we're just shifting to this new plan.
Okay, so I have a motion. Yes, Dr. Wells.
Confused, like, what exactly is she sitting there waiting for emails and phone calls to rent the building? Like, is she like the Maytag repairman, just sitting there and getting paid $15,000 and you get I'm confused about.
So we get requests on a regular basis for information, wondering if a building is available for rental or if a field is available for rental, what it might cost, information like that. it's a continuous request, and it's becoming more frequent now that people are sort of breaking out of COVID. So again, she may not have to respond to requests every single day, but she may have a few to respond to, and then there's an application process, and there's an insurance process to make sure that they're properly insured. So that's the administrative stuff that we're trying to shift off. Ms. McKinnon is the assistant business manager, and I'm trying to have her do higher level things in terms of the budget, financial reporting. Additionally, she has taken on grants administration, which has been quite a large role with all of our entitlement grants and, of course, all of the ESSER.
I have no problem with it. I'm just trying to figure out how we figured out the salary as opposed to, say, she reports, I worked 5 hours, and like how...
Well, that's what will happen.
Yeah, okay. That's why I wasn't clear. I heard the 15,000.
Oh, she bills her hours.
Okay.
That's
Okay, got it. Okay, that makes,
Yeah,
that makes
$50
Right.
Okay, that makes.
But no more
sense.
than 15,000.
And then the only other thing is, when somebody's doing another job, you can't double bill us, like, she's the trainer. She can't be, I don't want to see an hour of, when she's when she's the trainer, charging us for doing this too.
Right, we've been very clear that
Okay,
she would probably have to come in earlier
Yep.
to do
Okay.
that. I don't think that she's going to stay late to do that, but she would probably have to come in earlier in the day to handle that.
And then I think the other thing we want to evaluate is, like, how quickly is she getting back to people? You know,
I don't know how.
Yeah, so I think, that would be part of the evaluation. Because, if she's not getting back to people quick, then it's not really worth it too much.
Well, absolutely. If this doesn't work, it doesn't work. We've
Okay.
tried it, it
All right.
doesn't work,
Okay.
we'll have to go to Plan B, whatever that might
Okay,
be.
good. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dr. Wells, so I have a motion to approve this position. Do I have any discussion on that motion further?
And so it lasts for the year, so if it's
Yeah,
June, and then if
It's a question.
it's determined, then it should be in the budget next year.
Yeah.
This will be part of
Yeah.
our budget
Yeah,
discussion
okay.
in the next several
Okay,
months.
good.
We'll
Okay.
want to bring that up.
Yep, okay,
Okay,
good.
great.
Thank you.
Sounds like we might be able to make some dough, too. All right, any more, no? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes.
And also, that morning, we had Ms. Ryan in from special ed, as I indicated. Her severe needs category, and again, Dr. Beacon, we hear it all the time, whether special ed's here or not, that especially, it came up tonight, the whole COVID, social emotional issues really escalated, all of our population, but her severe needs is really, I think she emphasized, in crisis at this point, just, staff-wise, and it's become a safety issue, I underline safety, a top priority to do what she wants to do. Again, as always, enrollment is diverse across all of the schools across our district. Again, to Dr. Crowley's point, and I'm sure it comes under Ms. Young as well, we're not different than anybody else. All districts are dealing with this. It's just the after effects of society that we live in today, that these things are happening all over the place. So the idea that she came up with, Ms. Ryan wanted us to come up with, was a free program approach as her part of her action plan for hiring 3 board-certified behavioral analysis, BCBAs is her action plan, and hire 2 of those, from a 240 grant. And without going, those are my quick notes from that morning. She's also, as we've heard in the past from all of our SPED directors, the whole out-of-district finance, whether it's out-of-district tuition, out-of-district transportation, out-of-district needs. And I wish I shared her graph with us, because she compared, sorry, Mike, while the programs the May Institute, that Maureen indicated, and 2 other programs that, again, we hear about the tuition, the transportation, and the need of those. So with us, again, trying to keep the Woburn kids in Woburn, her crisis needs right now are 2 BCPAs. Discussion was lengthy. Ms. Ryan presented in such a way that our committee, the subcommittee, voted 3-0 in favor of allowing her to do this. We had it down, and I hope somebody has the correct figure. I probably wrote that wrong too, but $120,000 sound right, Mike? I'm sorry.
I can speak more to this, because I took notes as well.
You did, thank you.
If that's appropriate. So there was 3 steps. One was the out-of-district referrals to plan in the FY22 budget, because there's also out-of-district, not just in Woburn, but even the out-of-district placements are also having staffing issues, but she's trying to prioritize the students that are in crisis. Number 2 was the BCBA's $65,000 times 2 for $131,000, supported in the 240 grant, and will be reassessed through program evaluation for the I wrote 23 budget. Does that mean?
Yeah,
That's right.
That's the next budget.
Yes, that is the next budget. Excellent. So you're not the only one, Mike.
No.
There has been, we have an enormous population of severe learning deficits in Woburn, and this will likely be a long-term need, according to her. The third part was the RBTs, Registered Behavioral Technicians. $40,000 times 12 technicians for $480,000, which would be cheaper than sending 2 students out to either the May Center, Hopeful Journeys, or the Melmark Center. That would be 2, basically between tuition, transportation,
$2 million.
all the other things. So for that amount, for what we would pay for 2 kids to go out, we can get 12 people to help with contractual obligations, during like staff lunches, prep times. They would work 204 school days to provide continuity for extended school year. And these are people
So
that...
she wants them now?
No.
No. Okay,
First 2.
so I think,
Just the 2
2 now.
positions.
I know, yeah, so
It has
let's
to be
talk about the
discussed.
BCBA, because that's what she wants us to act on now. So, do I have,
That's a
is there a motion?
forecast.
For staffing the other need, I see that. Right.
That was a to-do later kind of thing.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, Madam Chair, to that point, the subcommittee voted in favor. I had it as 120, you have it as 130.
65
sounds
times...
more right.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Because that's
rounded...
our
It's been
entry
130.
level.
65 times 2.
131 was what she... I rounded that too.
So 130 for 2 PCPAs at this point. And to Ms. Cormier has a point, yes, there's further discussion, there's other issues down the road regarding some RBTs. But tonight, the motion is for 2 PCPAs at 130, again, crisis needs.
Out of
That's
the
a motion.
grant, it sounded like to me.
Yeah, so, can someone make a
240
motion?
grant. I just made the motion
Thank
to
you.
allow this to happen.
Second.
A second, any discussion on that motion?
So what is that grant, the 240 grant?
240 is the Special Education IDEA
Yeah.
grant. It's an entitlement grant. We get approximately $1.1 million per year.
And so by moving the 130, there's no other ripple effects down the road in terms of something you had already planned on, I guess.
The figures were reviewed to Mr. Alcanada and approved.
Okay. Okay, all right. I just don't want to have a,
Yeah.
next meeting, we have
Find out.
to do something else, because...
Find the money somewhere.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve $130,000 for 2 BCBA's, and it's not coming from city money or anything, it's coming from special ed grants from the federal government. Any,
Can we,
This-
I'm sorry, can
Oh,
we make
of
sure that
course.
motion is up to?
Yeah.
Because I'm not
Oh.
entirely sure it's going to be that much, because we are
Yeah.
into the
Okay.
fiscal year, and it all depends on where we hire them, so up to.
Sure.
One last thing. Is it over 130 that we might be looking at? You mentioned 131, you said you rounded down.
No,
he just said up to.
No, he said up to, but I heard you
No,
in your
she
notes
did the
said
math.
So
130.
she said
The
6...
figure is by 2, it would be 131,434.
Okay, that's what I'm saying.
Would be up to.
Okay.
So when do we do up to
130.
131?
132.
Yeah, I'd rather that.
Again, from the grant, so.
Yes, from the 240 grant.
Make them, Jeannie, getting all this, I'm sorry, 132. Up to PCPA, 2. Ms. McLeod has it, that's the motion.
She's awesome.
All
All
in
right,
favor?
all in favor? Aye, the motion passes.
Madam Chairman, going forward, if we have to do new positions, could we have like something written out ahead of time from the administration specifying all the conditions?
Actually-
I'm not ready to complain about minutes because mine are terrible.
Thank you, Dr. Wells. It
But I
sounds
just think
like
to make it easier
Ms.
for the whole
Ryan
committee.
gave the committee a
Yeah.
presentation.
Forward the presentation.
Yes.
Yeah, see that, we don't, the rest of
Absolutely.
us don't see
Yeah.
it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you could do that.
Remember when we used to try to get BCBA's, like struggle? Anyways,
Well, we
so,
Oh, she's
changed
still
it to
struggling,
BC.
yeah. So she's
Anyway.
still struggling, but
Yes.
moving forward with the rest of that meeting, we did discuss, as Ms. Cormier, about the RBT programs, and I think at this point, it's just for further discussion. Again, it's a financial matter, there's WTA topics to discuss with that, but she gave it to us, and Colleen, correct me if I'm wrong again, I'm sorry, at least 55 students in severe needs right now, long-term severe needs that we have to address.
55 in elementary school,
Yeah.
20 in middle school.
So it's severe, and it's not going to go away, and somewhere in my notes here, she said it's no different here than it is in any other district nearby, so it's not significant to Woburn. And the meeting adjourned, I think it was 10:30 a.m. or
It was.
9:30 or 11:30. I was off that day, but it was 10:30 in the morning.
All right, thank you for that.
Bad day that day.
And, thank you to Ms. Ryan for,
Yeah.
planning ahead of the students' needs. All right, Policy and Safety Subcommittee, Mr. Kissel.
Yeah, we did meet on October 4th, 1:30. Myself, Pat, Dr. B, Colleen, Ellen, Crowley were present. It was Zoom. My notes are very neat, as you can see, but
I thought mine
you should
was
have
bad.
gotten a packet in your, on the desk earlier this evening. One of the things that we are looking to, in a sense, adopt is policy adoption, which is BGB. If you get to that, you'll understand why we're going to do what we're going to do. The first step in the policy adoption, which is a policy, current Woburn Public Schools policy, as well as consistent with MASC reference manual, is using a packet of some sort. Maybe we won't have as many of these all at one time, but I know this all hit at once. Is information item, distribution with agenda. Discussion item, reading of the proposed policy or policies, response from the superintendent, report from any advisory committee assigned responsibility in the area, and committee discussion and directions for any redrafting. And then number 3 would be the action item, discussion and adoption. Currently, I believe we have a 30-day, just that's the way it's written, is 30 days, doesn't always fall into our meeting schedule with us moving things around and holidays and so on, vacation weeks. So this would give us, technically, it looks like it'd be about 2 meetings based on the ability to do that. And part of it is obviously to give members, the public, and staff the opportunity to review, react, or comment. So we did review a lot of the policies, if not all that are listed here, I believe. And I've got my notes, and it's just, some of it is remove some wording, some of it's replaced current policy, some are removal completely based on stuff that was probably from the 80s, maybe the 90s, that isn't accurate anymore. So overall, I guess what we're saying is we have the packet in front of us now, so we're going to give the committee and anyone else, the public, I'm assuming it's public record, the opportunity to review anything, make comments, and the next meeting would be discussion. So we'll need that on our agenda for the next meeting, as well as an action item at some point. If there were any emergency situations, and we've run into those before, that this adoption policy gives us the opportunity to take things kind of out of order and bring them on quicker. So we did, again, lots of stuff. I think I can use this as my minutes. It is pretty neat in my own way, but we will review all this at the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Kissel. Is there any action that the school committee needs to take on this?
I don't think on this. One of the other things we did talk about that evening, or I'm sorry, the afternoon, was a policy on concussions, and I believe there is a law in the books, Mass General laws.
I have a meeting with Mr. Grant.
Okay.
There's a policy in the MASC reference manual, and there is a state regulation that pertains to concussions. So I just need time to speak with him to see where we are in current practice and how that relates to what the regulations are.
Mhm.
And then we need to address it through policy.
Okay. So that's being handled. We also briefly talked about, because I think it came up in a correspondence, holidays, basically assigning homework and/or testing and so on. I don't know where we left off. It was actually a policy or more of an administration piece to let the staff know through the administration, to let the staff know to be aware of and/or.
Yeah, I didn't have that as a policy discussion, but I just just thought that that was procedural.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
There's no policy on it.
Yeah,
just-
I'm saying, it's not a policy, but just more that I had tell Matt to tell administration. I could say it nicer, but that's what I wrote. Just basically to make them aware of any situations and obviously address them individually or as a group for certain folks.
Yes, Dr. Wells?
Yeah, no,
Yeah, John?
I was thinking that actually probably should be a policy, with the general language that, respecting all traditions and religions. We asked the administration to give wide, acceptance of this and, just explaining, not setting the details, but saying why the administration can do this. Otherwise, then it seems arbitrary if the administration just says, tells people not to have tests and so forth on certain days. I think it really needs a policy to
I can
underlie it.
do, in advance of the next meeting,
Yeah.
I'll do a search of all policy manuals in
Yeah.
the state, see what's out there.
Yeah.
And we can, I'm sure
Right.
we'll find something.
Yeah, it should be general. It doesn't
Yeah.
specify, it just says the administration should, work to make sure everybody's needs are met based on things. And the only other thing is, I think probably want to change that, dispense to meet emergency conditions, because sometimes we do it to expedite things, and so I think we probably should, when we vote for policies, when we dispense with our procedures.
So you have the final policy that's there, that
Right.
is in our policy manual,
Yeah,
is that the commission can vote to suspend it.
right.
And that's it, obviously, that's at your discretion, it just allows you the flexibility to give you the time to do it.
Take it off the table.
I know, but it says to meet emergency conditions.
Yeah.
And I just think that's kind of limit, I don't know.
Totally, I mean, that's why,
Yeah,
between now and the next meeting,
Take
if
it.
there's
Yeah.
anything you want me to
Yeah.
look at, the specificity,
Yeah.
so that when it is discussion, I will.
Okay. sounds good.
That's the next meeting, discussion items.
All right.
Yeah.
So we
Get ahead of the curve.
Yeah, so we did, anything else I'm forgetting, or?
Tech.
What?
Tech. Do we want to talk about the tech
Tech.
policy?
The technology policy,
Yeah.
that's going to replace a lot of policies. It's all on the, so the PowerPoint that you see there.
Yep.
It'll tell
It
you.
will, each policy, and it goes right in order.
Yeah.
So the first one in the PowerPoint is the first one in your packet.
Yeah.
And then you can see the recommendations below, and then, the next meeting we can discuss them one by one.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so we did talk about that.
Yeah.
So we did adjourn at 2:47. That was it.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kissel.
Any questions?
Just one quick question, if I could, Mr. Kissel. So you indicated we have this packet, thanks to Dr. B, I guess. But
Yep.
who else can review this and where do they find it? If they have any input either to us or to their principals in the buildings? What's the best way for a citizen, parent, community member to look at this and say, I'd like to say something about this?
It's on the MASC website.
Yeah. To your point, I'm not 100% sure whether it's, we have a quick discussion. That's the first thing. Information, I should say, we get it. Will this be available through either the website and/or will it go out to staff?
Well, it could be part of the minutes that Jane will post.
Yeah,
Yeah, this addendum can be just added.
Yeah.
yeah.
Link to something?
Yeah.
Because one of the things that came up was
Yeah.
middle school retention, and both Mr. Quayle and Mr. Nelson talked about it, which gave them that opportunity. That's kind of what we're trying to get to, is stakeholders, like when we have the technology with the books and the hardware and so
So
on.
in the policy dissemination policy, BGE, you'll note that, so the orderly plan that we have for making these accessible is that our current policies are accessible via the drop-down on the left side of our website.
Okay.
Right.
And then obviously our agenda, our school committee agenda is showing exactly what policies that are going to be reviewed.
Right.
If the committee, the will of the committee is to have policies that are going to be posted in some other place, and happy to do that. And there's no harm in having people, view the policies that are going to be discussed, and state any opinions that they have.
Yeah.
So-
I mean, just obviously, and, I'm agreeing with everybody, at full transparency, that, if it's kind of, I don't want to say hidden away, but not as accessible, people might say, oh, I didn't know you were going to even be talking about that. They should have, but,
Right. But that's the thing, is that the way, this is the way it's done in districts.
Yeah,
Put
yeah.
that on the agenda.
You have a policy
When we vote.
subcommittee
Yes.
that's a publicly posted
It was on
meeting.
tonight, so now it's going to be
It's
on
on
next
the
week.
Right, so this is the
Yes.
whole thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it is technically publicly posted.
That's the addendum.
Yeah, no, I
addendum.
understand.
Right.
Yes, okay.
I suppose if someone is familiar with, our meetings, they, yeah, that's fine, okay. So we did adjourn at 2:47.
Thank you, Mr. Kissel.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mulrennan. Okay. Resource and capital planning, Dr.
Yeah,
Wells?
I know you assigned the light issue to me, so I'm still thinking about it.
The what?
The lights, remember Mr. Duran mentioned about the lights?
Yeah.
I didn't forget about it. Other people might have, but
He hasn't got his lights on yet, so.
it hasn't created enough energy to have a meeting for
Maybe
that.
after you change the clock?
That's right. I was
Right.
trying to figure out some way to get it into finance, and so I can avoid a...
Meeting?
Dr. Wells trying to avoid subcommittees. All right.
Okay.
SSA?
We have not met.
Okay. So correspondence on your behalf, I accepted the Woburn Teachers Association Notice of Bargaining, and I acknowledged their correspondence, and Dr. Crowley and I will be setting up a October meeting with who else is on the negotiation team, I think is Mr. Kissel.
You had your hand up.
I was looking to ask you something.
No,
Yeah,
I really think it's Mr. Kissel.
I think it is, too.
Lauren.
Yeah.
This would be my, 6th to 1.
It was like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're on, Mr. Kissel.
Excellent.
And you also have a question?
I do, so I don't know if you...
Sure, go ahead,
When are we going
yeah.
to have dates for that set up soon? Negotiation. Got to get those as far out as we can,
The dates.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
we'll do that.
if you could.
Starting after November 3rd?
Yeah. So I have a question, a correspondence, or a few correspondences that prompt my question.
Parade?
Okay, let me,
So- Yeah, I didn't know if you were done with that.
Oh,
sorry.
no, thank you, Mr. Kissel. I want to acknowledge, like I said, Valerie O'Brien sent us a correspondence regarding safe mitigation in the Woburn Public Schools. I talked to Dr. Crowley. He's going to review her recommendations, and we addressed some of them tonight, and I will respond back to her. I also saw that we got an email, like I just looked at my phone, from Allison DeVenter. And I haven't read it, but I want to acknowledge that she sent us an email. I have not forwarded it yet because I just saw it. And I believe it was supporting a pool testing protocol.
Yeah, we all got it.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay, great. So I want to acknowledge that because I have not read it in depth. And I think that's it. And if I missed anyone, I will definitely mention it next meeting. And Mr. Kissel. Oh, thank you. Yes, so I have a motion to enter those into the public record. Any, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Mr. Kissel?
Did talk to a couple of parents over the last, I don't know, a couple of weeks or so, just kind of, and it's always a good thing to find out, we're about a month in or so, maybe a month and a few days into the school year, how the traffic patterns, the drop-off situations, or any issues at any of the schools. And if there have they been as addressed as they can be, based on
Yeah, so the first couple weeks are always bumpy,
Yeah.
genuinely. A couple of the elementary schools are always congested because more parents drive to the elementary schools. We've added a couple bus stops to the Harold Wyman specifically to try to mitigate some of the congestion. And there were some, neighbors that we're trying to be good neighbors with. So to try to reduce the number of cars by adding bus stops. And so over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, it seems like things have calmed down.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. Anything else correspondence related? No? Okay. We do not have executive session tonight. We will have it next meeting, probably to discuss strategy and negotiation. Future agenda items.
Madam Chairman?
Yes?
So they can go to subcommittees, but I think there's a couple of things that, need to be looked at. One is suspensions and punishments. I don't think we've looked at that in a few years, and, we really should look at it sort of on a
Yes.
regular basis. And I don't know what happened last year in terms of that, in terms of suspensions and punishments, but, we should just keep an eye on that.
Thank you, Dr. Wells. Yes?
And then the other thing was the personnel hiring. We talked about an emphasis on trying to diversify our workforce. I just don't know how well our hiring did that this year. I looked at the pictures today, and I see there's some advancement in that, but I just don't know how well it worked, because I think we have to see what the results are and then work with the HR staff to see whether we have to change our process or adjust it, so.
Okay. Well, I know that Dr. Crowley will be doing a strategic plan eventually, and that would be a great thing
It's
to
just
look
sort of like
at.
a breakdown, like,
Yeah.
and what happened, how many reverse staff we got, and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, we'll put it on,
Yeah.
for a future agenda. I
Yeah.
can tell you that, it's on our,
Right, yeah.
on our radar, certainly.
Okay.
Good.
Vulnerable population, MCAS data, Mr. Lipset, and I was thinking about looking at kids that are homeschooling in Woburn and just, seeing what that data trend looks like and see what ways we can keep those kids engaged, just, as a,
Just a quick
Our homeschool, we
question,
don't,
how many homeschool students do we have? We know,
16 more, I believe, right now.
64?
Yeah.
Just thinking about whether or not the sample is large enough to really draw anything.
but they don't do MCAS, I don't think.
No, they do not.
no, but they have connections to the school. Yeah, we should be keeping track of them and just, noting.
I think
Do we have access to that information?
And what?
Do we have access
Yes,
to that?
of course we do. We have to approve
Of
homeschool
course.
plans.
Right, but,
Yeah.
It's just an interesting thing to look at. Okay.
and then if we're going to talk about numbers, I think enrollment numbers, we're talking about getting some
Yeah.
firm enrollment numbers for this year.
Okay.
Okay.
And, all right, motion to adjourn.
Wait,
Nope,
I also have a future
Yes,
agenda
future
item.
agenda? Sure.
So I guess partially it was a correspondence, but there was a parent who was concerned about the National Junior Honor Society, where their child, not to give too much of their information, but was on the list, but was not invited because they are now out of district. And so I think that we need to have a bigger conversation on the inclusion of out-of-district students through their home schools in the district still, because they are still Woburn students, and just a lot of, making sure the communications are going home if there's some kind of flyer or whatever, but anything, making sure that they are also included. I was hoping we could address that.
I know that the administration, I don't want to talk about any specific students, so never mind. But yes, okay. Any future agenda items?
And just, we had talked, I think, briefly about Alice training. I think, was that brought to policy? My memory is fuzzy.
No, I got sufficient, basically I was wondering, is that still the best training program? And from conversations, I learned that is the only, or the best one right now. So I'm satisfied. If you want to have more discussion, I just
I
don't.
mean, I think it's
Yeah.
there's a larger national conversation.
Yeah,
around
no,
this.
that's what-
There's a lot of new data coming out that
Yeah.
suggests it's not particularly healthy for
Yeah.
kids. I mean, I don't know exactly what the best avenue to discuss it is, but I do think it's worthy of
SSA,
SSA.
because we get the best minutes from them, and we know exactly what was said.
Send me your resources and I'll go right ahead and do that.
That's right.
Okay, any more future agenda items?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn? Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.